He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right. Anyone who's been with me for a week and a half knows one of the most important adults in my life has been Larry Elder, who got me interested in talk radio, got me interested in writing books, into the conservative movement. And it was my brief internship with him. It wasn't that brief. It was probably half a year that I had when I was at the end of high school into sort of a gap semester I took. Was the resume item that got me my job with Andrew Breitbart, and no turning back. And I would have to say, I think the country's a better place all because of that. And Larry's got a lot of people who he's touched in that way, Stephen Miller being one of them, and the list goes on and on. And he's my guest now. He's my colleague on Salem. He's got the Larry Elder Show, 3 to 6 p.m. Pacific time, live and on the Salem News Channel. And he's also on podcasts. You can get podcasts. He's also got a separate podcast. We got a country to save because Larry he's got a lot to say. Larry, when we were together, I think you were doing 3 and sometimes 4 hours of radio, and then you had a daytime TV show. So that's not news. That's not new for you, doing 4 or 5 hours of content a day. You can do that.
Well, that's right. I had a 4-hour radio show from 3 until 7.
Yeah.
I had just published my first book, The 10 Things You Can't Say in America. I was promoting that. I have a weekly syndicated column, which I've been doing since April of 1998.
Wow.
Over 1,200 columns. And of course, show prep. I did all of that and never got sick, never missed a day. I'm really kind of proud of that.
Unbelievable.
And I was working on a cure for cancer on the side. So
there are so many places where I could take it right away. But I want to talk about your longevity, and I know why you've had longevity. I've got an answer. It's research. You're very charismatic. You're an incredible talker, but you do homework. And that has really helped me because I'm already, even though my career's been half as long as yours, I'm 17, 18 years into my career. And I know what will save me is that I do homework and I read and I write and it's not just, I'm not just going off of that I'm charismatic or something. I'm not even saying that's not even a small part of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be studied. And I feel like that's what drew me to you to the start. I think that's what draws a lot of people to you today.
Well, one time somebody said to me, God, it must be nice to have a job where you only work 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I said, dude, you think I just roll into bed and out of bed and just go drive in and start yakking? It takes a great deal of show prep if you're going to do it right. And the idea is not just to talk, but to inform, to provoke, to persuade, to uplift, and that just literally takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said about the research. This happened just day before yesterday, Alex. After the show, there's a little restaurant not too far from where the station is, and I went there for dinner. I sat at the bar and watching the Thunder game and the Pacers game, and crowded bar, but there was a chair, empty seat next to me. Guy walks up and says, "Is anybody sitting there?" And I said, "No, you are." And he started laughing. We sat down and we started having a nice conversation. And he was drinking. I wasn't drinking, and I thought he was getting a little tipsy. And he said he's about ready to go. And I said, "Well, just be careful when you drive." And he said, "Well, frankly, you're the one who ought to be careful when you drive." And I wasn't drinking. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, I'm white, and if I get pulled over, I can probably talk my way out of it. You're black. If you get pulled over, you probably won't." I said, "You believe the police are racist against black people?" He said, "You don't?" And I said, no, I really don't. And I said, "Tell me something. How would you describe yourself ideologically?" Very liberal. He said, "Very liberal. I hate Donald Trump's guts. Do you like Donald Trump?" And I said, "You know what? That's a long conversation. Let's get back to what we were talking about before, about what you said about the police." He said, "Well, you know about George Floyd and all that. You must worry." And I said, "How often do you think the police kill an unarmed black person?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Give me an idea." "I don't know. I never thought about it." "Give me an idea. Just ballpark it." He said, "It probably happens twice a day." I said, "Do you think 2 times a day the police kill an unarmed black person?" He said, "Yes." I said, "So that means 730 times a year you believe that the police kill an unarmed black person." He said, "About that." I said, "Well, this has been researched. And it's funny, there's a website called policemag.com," I told him, where people who are self-described very liberal, as you just described yourself, were asked, how many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019? I said half of them said 1,000, which is roughly what you said. I said 8% said it was 10,000. And about just self-described liberals, 39% of them thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019, and 5% thought they killed 10,000. The answer, according to the Washington Post database, was 12. He said, 12? Yeah, well, that's Washington Post. They're pro-Trump. I said, the Washington Post is pro-Trump.
Yeah.
He said, well, it's owned by Jeff Bezos. He gave some money to the Trump inauguration. I said, so therefore the Washington Post is pro-Trump. Well, even if it is, which it isn't, the database number I gave you came out before Bezos gave the money. So I would think that the number is accurate. The point is this: you were not just wrong, you were wildly wrong about how often the police kill unarmed black men. In fact, the police kill more unarmed white men every year than unarmed black men, but you probably couldn't name an unarmed white man because the media doesn't care. This is what you think is going on in the streets versus what really is going on in the street. I said, I know why you feel that way. You're a self-described, very liberal person, and you're trying to be empathetic towards black people. I said, what you're doing is being condescending, and you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong. You ought to rethink your attitude and rethink your whole position on how racist America is. He then changed the subject. We started talking about basketball. So
unbelievable. It's the I don't want to debate you, Larry. It's the and I'm pro debater. I wouldn't want to debate you. See, everyone, you see what just happened. It's the raconteurism. It's a fantastic story. All of it's rooted in data. That's what makes Larry so special. And I got to tell you, Larry, I'm sitting on a mountain of research on some of these unarmed blacks who were shot that I have not figured out a good way to get it out or the right timing. And I will tell you that it's even worse than you described, like the way the media's exaggerated it. Yeah. And the Washington Post should be really taken to task for that database. That database did a lot of damage to this country. And we might need to talk about that offline, because that's been something that's been a bee in my bonnet for a while, that I really think that database harmed us as a people.
Well, it's ground zero, because the left, playbook is to use race to advance whatever their issue is, whatever it is, whether it's climate change, if they've got some sort of angle about racism, because the Democrats have lost the white vote since 1964. The way they win elections is to convince black people and Hispanics that they're victims in this war on social justice, and we wear the white hat, and these SOBs over there wear the black hat. And so black people are being used, manipulated, in order to advance the agenda of the Democratic Party. As you well know, by far, the number one problem facing the black community is the epidemic of fatherlessness. The fact that 70% of black kids today enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. Even Barack Obama, in a lucid moment, said that kids raised without fathers are 5 times more likely to be poor, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. We ought to be talking about what's happened since the mid-'60s, when Lyndon Johnson launched the war on poverty. 25% of black kids enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. The number is now almost tripled. Because what happened is we've, through the so-called war on poverty, we've incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And if people really cared about black people, like that gentleman I talked to in the bar, he'd be talking about that, but he isn't. It's just very offensive. There is I have a caller named Gloria from Dallas, one of my nemesis. And I was talking about this epidemic of alleged black people being killed by the police. And I said there are more white people killed by the police and more unarmed white people killed by the police. So Gloria calls up. She happens to be from Dallas. Larry, you keep talking about unarmed white men being killed. I never heard of a single one. I said, Tony Tempa, Dallas. She said, what? I said, T-I-M like Mary, P like Paul, A. Google it. And the video is even longer than George Floyd, even more difficult to watch. It's a guy who was mentally ill, had not taken his meds. He's the one who called the cops. Cops show up, they hold him down, they pin him down, they ridicule him, they joke with him, they keep him down. He's literally saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And the medics show up, he's dead. And then there's another one here in California named Kelly Thomas, also on video, a mentally ill homeless guy. A bar owner calls the police and falsely says somebody is ransacking cars near my establishment, because he knew if he called the police and said, I got a homeless guy I want to get rid of, the police wouldn't come. So the police come. They assume the guy is a guy who's been involved in ransacking cars, which he wasn't. They literally beat the crap out of him with their fists. It's all on YouTube. And again, the beating goes on for about 15, 20 minutes. And there were two
This
officers.
show is unbelievable. It was probably your show, Larry, when this happened. I remember this redheaded guy, right? Yeah. I remember this.
There were 6 officers involved. 3 were charged. 2 were found not guilty, and therefore they dropped the charges against the third guy. Now, if that were George Floyd, everybody would know his name, would know what happened. We'd be celebrating the anniversary. Tony Tempa, we know his name, celebrating the anniversary.
Right.
But because it's 2 white guys,
Murals.
they're just 2 dead flies, and nobody cares. It's manipulation.
There are a lot of cell phone service providers out there, and I saw one the other night claiming that they share my values and, quote, stand for something. What exactly do they stand for? They wave the flag, but they're not specific. And that's why I chose Patriot Mobile, because I know exactly what they stand for, and they aren't shy about it. Patriot Mobile stands for the lives of the unborn and actively participates in the March for Life. I love the March for Life. I told you guys when I lived near the Lincoln Memorial, absolute highlight of the year is March for Life. They donate millions of dollars to organizations that protect the unborn. They stand for the Second Amendment. They partner with organizations that actively fight for your right to protect yourself and your family. They honor and support our veterans and our first responders. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who truly shares your values. And Patriot Mobile gives you the freedom to choose the best network for you because they have access to all 3 major networks, not just one. Right now, you can get a free month of service when you go to patriotmobile.com/Alex, or you can call 972-PATRIOT. Keep your number, keep your phone, or you can upgrade. It's up to you. Talk is cheap. The only cell phone company that actually lives your values is Patriot Mobile. You can go to patriotmobile.com/Alex for your free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/Alex or call 972-PATRIOT. Great people, great sponsors. Check them out. Yeah, of course it is. And it is condescending to Black people. And one thing, Larry, that I want to check in with you, thinking about this, is that how is this going for Black America? How's this going for minorities in this country in general? The woke moment, and I want to eventually shift this to a conversation about LA, which is on fire right now. And you're one of I would say the top LA conservative over the last half century, which is congrats on that. That's pretty cool. But it is.
I worked hard for the title of the Black Face of White Supremacy.
Yeah, you really did. You really did. From that monstrous reporter from the LA Times.
One more quick thing before we leave Kelly Thomas.
Yeah, please.
The Orange County Register called his beating, quote, one of the worst police beatings in the history of America, close quote. And nobody knows his name.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. It's even I had to it clicked in for me, but it took a second, and it should be automatic. Of course, it should be. I remember the story was so heinous, it was so unbelievable, and we don't. So my question, I guess, is: Are we ever able to reset? Because I feel like that's what's going on here with this defense of the illegal aliens over law-abiding citizens in California right now. I think at the heart of it, the Democrats can never admit they're wrong, and they can never admit what they're doing is not working. And I think this point, what you've been saying, I feel like common knowledge that the number one problem facing Black families is fatherlessness, and I feel like that's Thomas Sowell talking about it when I was in diapers, and I feel like that you've been talking about it for decades, and I feel like we know, and then we never did anything. And then are we able to change as people? Are we able to admit we got this one wrong? We need to start encouraging this behavior or this tactic and move away from this? Or do we just take everything to the grave, Larry? Do we take every bad idea to the grave?
Well, the good news is there is a growing conservative ecosystem consisting of people like you, people like Charlie Kirk, people like Candace Owens, people like Joe Rogan. No longer does the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR have a monopoly. And now when something happens, there is a response through our ecosystem that we never had before. So I am more optimistic about news really getting out and bad news being debunked than I ever have been before. That said, we often are talking to the same people, preaching to the choir, and And so the gentleman that I sat next to, and we started out with talking about, it believes that the police are killing unarmed Black people every day because this is what he's learned, this is what he's taught, this is what he believes. So how do you disabuse somebody of that until and unless you can literally force him or her to begin listening to stuff they don't otherwise listen to? I watch a lot of CNN. I watch a lot of what I call MSNBC. I want to know how they're thinking. I want to know what their talking points are so I can address them. But a lot of people just don't do that.
Yeah, and it's Prager points this out quite a bit about how we're constantly consuming their content, and they don't consume ours at all. They're so bubbled, and you really see a lot of this in a lot of the reactions. The way they behave publicly is clearly often like they never have anyone who's telling them this is a terrible idea.
We don't have a choice. You can't swing a dead cat in California without hitting a couple of liberals. A couple of quick stories. As you know, I ran for governor in the recall election, and this is in 2021. So the race is over, and I go to a restaurant on the west side of LA. LA is liberal, west side even more liberal. And my buddy that I'm waiting to have dinner with is late. So I'm sitting there by myself, and there's a table with two ladies next to me. I think they feel sorry for me for just sitting there. So we start talking. And turns out over the course of the 15, 20 minutes we're talking, they are 85 years old. They're Jewish. They've known each other since the second grade. One of them was celebrating her birthday. One of them called herself a human rights advocate, whatever that is. The other one called herself a psychotherapist. And then about 15, 20 minutes into the conversation, Alex, one of them says, "Wait a minute. I know you. You're that guy that ran for governor. You're that Larry Elder." And she said, "Guess who we voted for?" I said, "You didn't vote for me." She said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Let's see. We're on the west side of LA. You're both Jewish. One of you is a human rights advocate. You didn't vote for me. It doesn't take Columbo to put that together. You didn't vote for me." And they laughed, and they said they admitted that they didn't vote for me. And let me ask you something. You guys have kids? We did. We now have grandkids. I said, were any of your kids or your grandkids in the LA Unified School System, even though you both said you live in LA? And they said, "Oh, absolutely not. The school system is too bad." I said, "Did you lose any friends or your friends lose any businesses because of the way Gavin Newsom shut down the state because of COVID in a more severe way than anybody else?" Yes, we've lost friends. People left the state. One of my friends lost her business. It was outrageous the way he shut down the state.
That's right.
I said, how do you feel about homelessness? We have a homelessness camp near our home, and it's outrageous. It's near a school. I said, how do you feel about the way Gavin Newsom has been managing the crime problem? And they both admitted that they knew cops who had low morale because of the accusation that the cops were systemically racist and were abusing Black people. And I said, have you lost any friends? Because California's lost population in the last 3 years.
Sure.
And people, they said, yes, we have friends, good friends who've left. One of our friends has a daughter who couldn't buy a house, so she left because she wanted to buy a house, couldn't buy one in California. I said, so here we are. Here we are completing each other's sentences, yet you didn't vote for me.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a conversation like this with a Republican? They looked at each other and they said, no. And he said, one of them said, what are you drinking? I said, double vodka, a little bit of cran. She said, I got your drink. The other one said, what are you eating? I said, well, I wasn't going to have a steak, but if you're going to buy it, I'll upgrade it to lobster. So they bought my drinks, they bought my meal. They had never had a conversation with somebody like me. And another one, I have this in my book called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State. I started talking about these two stories. So the campaign is over. I have some back issues, and a buddy of mine recommended a massage therapist he said was really good. So I get the number, and I go to the address. I'm thinking it's going to be in some office building somewhere. I turn down a residential street, and it's a house. So I walk up, knock on the door, and a woman opens the door, probably about 40, 45 years old. She's got tattoos everywhere, 8 or 9 different hair colors, piercings everywhere but her eyeballs. And she opens the door, and I get hit in the face with a big plume of marijuana smoke. Not that I would know what that smells like.
No. Well, you do if you're in L.A. It's a total, like, the air's all polluted now with it.
And so she starts working on my back. She really is good. And she's playing Motown music, which is my favorite genre of popular music. So a song would come on like My Girl, and I pretty much knew the backstory about every song that came on. I said, My Girl was written by Smokey Robinson for the lead singer of David Ruffin. David Ruffin, unfortunately, died because of a drug overdose. And then another song came on. That's Marvin Gaye. It's from an album called What's Going On. The founder of Motown, Berry Gordy, did not want him to record it, and because he wanted to write his own music, because Gordy liked to control the music, but Marvin Gaye put his foot down and insisted. Became the best-selling album of all time for Motown. Every time a song came on, it pretty much knew the backstory. So about 45 minutes into the session, she goes, you know, I know who you are. When you called to make your appointment, I knew who you were. I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't vote for you. However, had I known you were this funny and this personable, I would have voted for you. I said, "Do you know any Republicans?" She said, "No." I said, "You don't know a single Republican?" She said, "No." I said, "News bulletin. We have personalities. We have senses of humor. How could you not know a Republican?"
Right.
Hello?
It's an amazing story, and it's so common out here, Larry. It blows your mind, and it's something that I talked to the audience about this recently. I went to my wife's 20-year high school reunion. She was a grade lower than me at Harvard Westlake, and a lot of the people they knew what I did for work, and they knew my involvement with the Trump movement, and a lot of people would really just come up to me and ask fundamental questions about stuff we believe, stuff that you and I talk about in our shows every single day, and they could basically they could have got caught up in 1/2 hour of talk radio over the last 20 years, but they never did it, like not one time. And then, we're kicking their butts now politically, aside from places like LA, but around the country we are. And they're fascinated by it because it's not unreasonable. It's always rooted in data and actual analysis. And we make concessions where we make mistakes, and we know how to poke fun at our own side. And they're always shocked by this, and yet they won't change. What is that impulse that they don't have they're not curious? Are they afraid? It's got to be a fear thing, right? That if they're exposed to our ideas, we might convince them.
Well, from college, there's something called cognitive dissonance, which is the feeling that you're wrong and you don't want to be unwrong. And so it's really hard for people to change. People, I find, though, commonsensical people, if you can get to them, they don't want to be ill-informed. I'm often invited to give speeches by conservative groups, Republican groups, and almost always the overwhelming majority of the audience is white. But every now and then, there are a handful of Black people that come. So I'm giving a speech one time at one of these organizations, and when I speak, I try to make eye contact around the room, and I see this Black guy standing in the back with his arm folded, with this kind of menacing expression on his face, big dude. And I would make a point, he would shake his head slowly. I make another point, he'd shake his head slowly. I make another point, he'd shake his head slowly. The thing is over, and he's approaching me. I've got security with me almost whenever I give a speech, and so my security guards were wary of this guy. He comes up to me and he goes, "Mr. Elder, I really thought that I was well informed. I had no idea that the number one cause of preventable death for young Black men was homicide, whereas the number one cause of preventable death for white males is accidents, like car accidents and drownings. I had no idea that 85% of Black eighth graders nationwide could neither read nor write at grade level. I had no idea that about 25% of young Black men have criminal records, arrests, probation, or jail, as opposed to 10% of young white males. I really thought that I was well informed until I heard your speech. Thank you so much. I've been watching too much CNN. I've been reading too much New York Times. I'm going to change my ways." And he walked away.
So beautiful.
So that is not an uncommon kind of reaction for people once you sit them down. Who wants to be that wrong-headed?
Yeah.
I know that the guy that I talked to at the bar is different. I'm not sure, he started reading Thomas Sowell, but I'm sure he had to rethink his attitude about the cops.
Well, let's go back to California for a second, and I do want people to pick up your book that you put out with Bombardier Books, which are good people over there. As goes California, my mission to rescue the Golden State and save the nation. It goes into detail about your recall campaign, where it's a two-part vote. So Newsom was up for recall, and then if he had been recalled, then you would have won the governorship. But he was not recalled, so that was the saga there. But I want to talk about this phenomenon of people in this town in particular, and I imagine it extends to much of the rest of California, where they can see the problems and yet will not fix them. I have some neighbors who I'm friends with who I would say agree with me on most stuff. And they're legal immigrants, so they detest illegal immigration. The group that detests illegal immigration the most is always illegal immigrants. Right. They work hard, pay a lot in taxes, so they don't like the homelessness and they don't like the crime around here. And yet somehow they just detest Trump. And it's like, well, he's the only solution to all the stuff that you don't like, all the things that animate you when we talk politically, and yet you can't bring yourself to give the guy a shot once. And I imagine that I'm not sure if they were residents when the recall happened, but I'm sure they didn't vote for it. I'm sure they're happy with Newsom. And what is this psychology? You've had the longest time of anyone I know to think about it. I mean, have we figured this out?
Well, if you are specifically talking about why the Trump hatred, I tell people I'm a big sports guy. I love sports. I don't play golf, but I do love the sport, and I'm fascinated by it. And so one day I'm watching the Golf Channel, Alex, and there's a host, and she's got these two professional golfers, and she's interviewing them. She says to them, "What makes a good golfer?" And one of them went to this long, detailed, mechanical explanation of what makes a good golfer, where you put your feet, how you swing, where you put your arms, where you have your eye contact. It was a 30-second, beautiful explanation about what mechanically makes a good golfer. The other one folded his arms and said, "I look to see where the ball lands." People are paying attention to Donald Trump's swing, his style, the way he disses people, ridicules people.
Right.
I care about where the ball is landing,
right.
on the economy, on the borders, on foreign policy. No new wars. Inflation was negligible. Economy was awesome. The borders were secured. That's what I care about. All the rest of it is, pardon the expression, white noise. And I've also found that so many people who despise Donald Trump are invested in despising him, and they refuse to undespise him no matter what the facts are. I was in a building a few months ago on the 5th floor, my dentist, and I'm getting in the elevator and push the ground floor, and I absentmindedly whip out my cell phone like everybody does these days.
Yeah, like a
And the
pacifier.
doors open.
Yeah.
Doors open. It's the 2nd floor. And I'm walking off absentmindedly, and I smack into a woman who is a little woman. You can't say midget anymore.
No.
It was a little woman, and my knee literally hit her in the forehead, and she dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Picked her up and helped her back on the elevator. She goes, "I know you. You ran for governor, and I don't agree." So the elevator goes down to the ground floor, and we continue talking. I said, "May I ask you what it is I've said or done that you disagree with the most?" She said, "Well, you support Donald Trump, and he's an asshole." And I said, "Okay, what's the number one thing that makes Donald Trump an asshole?" And she said, "Well, I have a disability." I'm assuming she meant her height, which I personally did not perceive to be a disability.
Sure.
She was not misshapen or anything. Everything was just small. And I said, and she said, "He mocked a disabled reporter." And I said, "What's your name?" She said, "Louise." I said, "Louise, no, he didn't.
No.
The reporter you're talking about is named Serge Kowaleski, worked for the Washington Post. And Donald Trump said that on 9/11, there were people in New Jersey who were cheering when the Twin Towers fell. And because Donald Trump is Donald Trump, everything he says gets fact-checked. And for a day or two, nobody could find any corroboration. So Trump produces this article from this guy. And people went to him and said, "Well, did this happen? Did you see this?" And he began to back away from his story, I told Louise. He said, "Well, I didn't see it. I'm not sure it was 200. I'm not sure how many it was." And so Donald Trump at a rally is mocking the way this guy retreated from the story. And he said, "I don't know. I don't remember. Now, Serge Kowaleski does have a misshapen arm, but he doesn't vibrate like this. If you go on YouTube and look at him, he speaks very evenly. He's a very articulate guy. He doesn't shake like this." Trump was ridiculing what he perceived to be a retreat from his story. Furthermore, I said, "Kowaleski never even said he mocked me. Other people said it." And there's a website called Catholics for Trump showing Trump using that gesture to mock himself, to mock an able-bodied general. Trump is a stand-up comic. He does this.
He's a stand-up comic. That's right.
And she said, you're making me think. I'm Jewish. And Trump has been a friend to Israel." I said, "A friend? He's probably been the best friend Israel ever had. He moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He did the Abraham Accords. He stopped paying the PLO because they were using the money. It's called pay to slay, giving families of homicide bombers money after they blew up a bunch of Jews." I said, "He's been far and away the best friend Israel ever had." And she said, "You really are making me think." And I got to rethink a lot of things. I said, "Louise, you mind if I take a picture with you?" She said, "Sure." So I bent down and I took a selfie, and she said, "Thank you for asking permission before you took the picture." I said, "Why wouldn't I do that?" She said, "Well, because of my height, I walk down the street and people whip out their phones and take pictures of me like I'm an exhibit in a zoo." I said, "Well, they're assholes." So she started laughing, and I wrote an article about this encounter. But again, people, I think, don't want to be misinformed. If you have common sense, if you're reasonably intelligent, and you realize that you've been wrong about things, I think a lot of people will engage in the unpleasant task of rethinking their assumptions.
Just sensational. Just a great story, Larry. We missed out so much in California. Just before we go to contemporary stuff, what do you? I want a little bit of your analysis on what happened, just from because I was so optimistic. I was just moving back to California from living in DC for 8 years when the recall was going on, and I thought this was our chance, and maybe we could really seize the moment and finally turn the page on the single party governance in this state. And we didn't. And I think we really blew it. And then we have the fires that must have been even harder for you to watch than the rest of us. And
right.
knowing that you could have helped.
Because fire management, forest management was a big part of my campaign. We have the same infrastructure as when the state was half the size. And that was one of the issues during the campaign for governor. What happened is I got into it, Alex, because I thought this was a chance for me to sneak through with as little as 25% of the voters cast because of the way the recall was structured. 50% plus one had to vote to recall Gavin Newsom. And if that succeeded, whoever got the most votes on the replacement side, and there were 46 candidates, counting myself, would have become governor. And I got 49% of the replacement vote, which, by the way, was the same percentage that Arnold Schwarzenegger got.
It's a monster, totally. I mean, and you came from, you were late in the race, I think, if I recall, and it's that you just
raised about $30 million in about 8 weeks, more than all the others combined, by the way. California has 58 counties. On the replacement side, I carried 57 of 58. The only one I didn't carry was San Francisco, and I lost that by 149 votes. And I ran against the first guy that ran against Gavin Newsom. His name was John Cox. I ran against a two-term mayor of San Diego named Kevin Faulconer. That's the one that Kevin McCarthy wanted and told the Republican coalition to back this guy. And when it was obvious the grassroots wanted me, he told everybody to stay out of the race at all and didn't, only two House Republicans in California endorsed me, Michelle Steele and Doug LaMalfa in the Sacramento area. Darrell Issa said kind things about me on CNN, but he did not formally endorse me. Only two of them did. I carried San Diego County, which is, again, the guy that Kevin McCarthy wanted, by 30 points. And the next highest Republican got roughly 6% of the vote. So I got 49%. Next highest Republican got 6%. What happened is that the Democrats went to school on why they lost the first time against Arnold Schwarzenegger. Remember, there was a prominent Democrat on the replacement side. He was lieutenant governor. He ran against his own boss, and he ended up getting around 32% or so of the vote, making it more likely that the first part would pass because a lot of people wanted him to be the governor. So the Democrats made sure there was no prominent Democrat this time on the replacement side. Antonio Villaraigosa, two-term popular former mayor of L.A., thought about running, and everything I heard is that they went to him, pressured him not to run, offered him all sorts of things. I'm not saying anything illegal, but offered him all sorts of things, and he ended up not running in the replacement side. Had he been in that race, I would have become the governor because he would have siphoned up 30-40% or so of the voters, people who like him and want him to be the governor. So they made a concerted effort to make sure no prominent Democrat was there. I also made some things in retrospect that were tactical mistakes. For example, Donald Trump reached out to me and he wanted to publicly endorse me. I don't know what else he would have done, but he was going to publicly endorse me. Byron Donalds reached out. Sarah Palin reached out. Other people reached out, prominent Republicans. And I said, you know what? I appreciate the support, but if you endorse me, they're going to make this all about this being a Republican takeover. And so I respectfully declined to have the support from all of them. First ad that ran, stop the Republican takeover. So they did it anyway, so it really didn't matter.
Right.
The other thing is I never said one thing about voting early. I felt that our people were going to show up on election day, and they did in droves. But by then, you could have banked a lot of solid Republicans to spend your money and your time trying to get the undecideds or people that otherwise would not come out to vote. That's what they do. I did not do that. And obviously, this last time in 2024, Republicans learned from their mistake and they began telling people to vote early, and they did. I never did. So I think not not being willing to receive the endorsements of prominent Republicans, including Donald Trump, probably hurt me, and not telling people to vote early probably hurt me. But the biggest factor by far, Alex, is the fact that these guys were smart enough not to put a prominent prominent Democrat on the replacement side. So that, to me, is pretty much what sealed my fate. There hasn't been a Republican elected statewide in California in 20 years. We're outnumbered 3-1. So if the ball had carried them the right way for the recall and they had a prominent Democrat there, I'd be talking to you right now from Sacramento.
Unbelievable. We missed out so much. And but Larry, your legacy is so vast, and I'm a big part of it. There are many others like me, but it was really kind of a fun moment that Charlie Kirk had me on his Monster podcast to talk about California, what's going on in California, and I got to quote something I read from your research over. It had to have been 20 years ago. I think this may have even been before I was your intern, or the latest when I was your intern. And you were writing about, again, your signature, taking a big idea and then putting the data behind it. How I had no idea how expensive it is to educate people in California. And a lot of that has to do with illegal immigration and how expensive it is, the unions and the bureaucracy, et cetera. But it's very expensive to educate people who don't have English as a native language and who don't speak English in the home. It's incredibly complicated to do this stuff. It gets very expensive. It's just one of many downstream effects. I went on to cite some of the stuff that my wife has to deal with being a doctor in the area. And this is what illegal immigration is all about. It's not just that we hate immigrants. It's never been about that. It's that there's just no way to run a society. And I relied on your research, particularly on education. And so it was fun that you tweeted that, which is nice because Media Matters grabbed it. And Media Matters sometimes helps out, but inadvertently. But tell me, expand on this phenomenon about illegal immigration, because you were, again, when I was just a baby, you were on top of this issue. It's not that we don't like immigrants or that we can't have any immigrants. It's that you can't run a country this way.
Right. And nobody has a problem with legal immigrants. And as you pointed out, the people that are most angry about illegal immigrants are legal immigrants. And people love to say about how much taxes that people who are here illegally pay in, and they do pay in some federal income taxes, and they do pay some sales taxes. But the net overall effect based on what I have read, is that illegal aliens cost the American taxpayer a great deal of money. In California, I've heard estimates as low as $20 billion a year, maybe as high as $30 billion a year. And one of the primary reasons is because of the cost of education, K through 12. The Supreme Court ruled that you cannot inquire about somebody's immigration status when they are enrolling in public school K through 12. So even if California were willing to exclude illegal aliens or make them pay for their own education, they couldn't do it legally. So you have all these people in this state illegally. There might be as many as 1.5 million illegal aliens in California alone. They have kids, and then they're getting a K through 12 education, roughly at a cost here in LA, probably around $20,000 per year, all in, times 7 years. And
Larry, give us that data again, because this is fresh. This is the data I was thinking of was older data, but the principle remains the same. Give us that again, because this is a point to bring to your supposedly neutral or liberal friends in your life, right, who because they've never thought. I can guarantee you they've never thought of this stat. Do this again.
Yeah, well, in California and LA Unified School District, paying about $20,000 per year per student, and if you multiply that from the kindergarten up to the 12th grade, you're talking about well over what's that? Quarter of a million
dollars, and the scores are going down. The schools function as prisons. Right. I mean, teachers are terrible. Like it's not every teacher, but many of them are.
And God forbid you should discipline a kid and kick the kid out, and the kid's a, quote, person of color. One of these civil rights groups will yell and scream and accuse a teacher or the principal of engaging in racism. So you leave a bad kid in the class. If you have a class size of 20, 30 people and there are one or two knuckleheads, it drives down the learning curve for everybody, so everybody suffers. Now, that's just education. Then you have medical benefits. Anybody can walk into an ER. Again, you can't inquire about somebody's immigration status when they walk into an ER. And get treated. And of course, they don't charge anything if you're poor. And then you've got in California, A lot of illegal aliens are eligible for taxpayer-provided health care, and Gavin Newsom just signed a bill to expand taxpayer-provided health care to all illegal aliens in California. And they gave a certain estimate. I think the estimate was going to be about $8 billion a year. And turns out it ended up costing over $10 billion a year because they underestimated how many people would sign up. And then because we have this massive deficit, Gavin Newsom then decided, well, we're not going to expand the coverage for all illegal aliens just yet. By the way, he wants to have single payer here in California. And the Democrats, of course, would like to have single payer in California. And they ran an estimate, and the estimate is it would cost twice as much as the entire California budget. So they have now backed away from that, but believe me, it will rear its ugly head again. Every dumb idea in Washington, D.C. has been tried twice here in California, so they'll be back. They'll be back. And then, of course, crime. It is not true that illegal aliens commit less crime than do American citizens. That is a popular refrain. And the reason they can get away with that is almost nobody calculates illegal alien crime. One state that does so is Arizona. And John Lott's done a lot of investigation about that. And turns out illegal aliens are much more likely to commit crime than American citizens and than legal immigrants. So you add all that stuff up, crime, healthcare costs, education costs. Illegal aliens cost America a great deal of money, and California in particular, because we have so many illegal aliens in this state.
It's remarkable. It's the only good stuff that comes of this stuff is that I think it's inspired so many people like Prager and you guys have inspired so many people to just really see clarity about why California has been such a failed experiment. Hopefully we can get back on track. But what do you make of the latest round of ICE violence? Larry, I've been commenting on the show how they should really be raising the Spanish flag, because I was an amateur LA historian in a former life, and it was Spanish before it was Mexican. So it's we should the flag of Spain over the freeway off ramps.
If you want to give it back to Spain.
Yeah, exactly. Give me your take.
Look, people should be celebrating what Donald Trump is doing, because these ICE raids here in LA, they're not out here picking up gardeners. They're out here picking up bad guys who have deportation orders in many cases. One of the guys that they targeted had committed murder. Another one committed rape. Another one drug trafficking. Another one human smuggling. These are the kinds of people that ICE is targeting, the so-called worst of the worst. We ought to be celebrating that. And when ICE started these raids this past weekend, I looked at the front page article about it in the New York Times, LA Times, which I read every morning so that you don't have to. And not one word about the targets, not one word about the illegal aliens that ICE had scooped up. Picked up another newspaper, not one word. It wasn't until I read, I think it was on Fox and I think maybe Breitbart, where they talked about the crimes some of these people had in fact committed. So, if you talk about illegal aliens doing sweeps and you ignore why they're doing the sweeps, you can probably gin up a lot of hatred towards what ICE is doing. But the real outrage, of course, is what's happened in the last 4 years. Pete Hegseth put the number at 20 million illegal aliens that Biden let in the last 4 years. That's the highest number I've ever heard. I've heard more like 10, 12, 15 million. However you slice it, that is a boatload of people who came into the country through the southern border, unvaccinated, not vetted, several on the terror watch list, several have been convicted of homicide in their own home countries, and they're here. And the same people who are outraged over the idea of ICE trying to get rid of some of the bad guys said nothing whatsoever for 4 years. I know they didn't, because when Biden first became president, I watch, as I said earlier, a lot of CNN, a lot of MSNBC. So I'm watching Bill Melugin, the Fox News reporter, on the border with the overhead drones covering all of this. And I switch over to CNN, and the bet I have is what's the over-under on when they talk about Trump if they're not already talking about him. And half the time they're already talking about Trump in an unrelated matter. And then within 20 to 30 seconds, they're talking about him for some other reason. Week after week, month after month, it was almost 2 years or so before they began covering this. And only because Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and DeSantis, the governor of Florida, put these illegal aliens on buses and sent them up north to places like Chicago, New York, and Martha's Vineyard, and they were forced to cover it. But by then, they weren't covering it. 1 year, we had 2.5 million illegal aliens in the country. And a pollster asked Americans how many people came into the country illegally that year. The average answer was 250,000. They were off by a factor of 10. That's how ill-informed they were.
Yeah. Larry, so who do you think wins the political battle here? Because I love what Trump is doing. I think even the Democrats who are national Democrats, I'm hearing Democrats from the Rust Belt, Democrats who are making a living in Washington, I think they like it. But the culture here overwhelmingly is anti-enforcing the law and pro illegal immigration, and that was they're a little more animated now than they were before the election. I think before the election, I think they kind of saw the writing on the wall in retrospect, and not this time. They really can think they're going to win this thing culturally, that Trump is going to be the bad guy in the end. What do you think?
Well, you have to start with how many people accept the proposition that there ought not be any people in the country illegally. I'm not sure the majority of Americans feel that way. I think the majority of Americans feel that really bad illegal aliens shouldn't be here. The so-called worst of the worst shouldn't be here. But Tom Homan has said on more than one occasion, quote, everybody's on the table. So if we scoop up an illegal alien, violent criminal, and he or she is hanging around with a bunch of other illegal aliens, we're not going to ignore that. They're going to be deported as well. I'm not sure most Americans support that or want that. I do. I don't believe anybody should be in the country illegally. I don't care what you do. I don't care whether you're a dishwasher, a gardener, a day laborer. You should avail yourself of the app that Donald Trump has set up. Go back to your home country and then reapply and come back in. I know people have done that. It may be more time and money than you want, but there's no reason why you can't do that. I'm not sure most Americans are there. I know the polls show that most Americans now support, quote, mass deportation, but I think when most Americans think about mass deportation, they're thinking about people that have committed violent crimes in addition to the crime that they committed when they came into the country. So I'm not sure the bulk of Americans are there. And I know what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who's sympathetic. They try to do it with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's not sympathetic, but they're going to find some 12-year-old son of a dishwasher who now has to get deported because his father's going to be deported, and he doesn't want to be separated from his father, so he's got to go. But he's in the 7th grade, and he's a good athlete. Everybody loves him, and it's just horrible. That's what they're looking for, and believe me, they're going to find somebody like that.
They're going to, sure. And I agree with this. And I was kind of shocked that they picked the Abrego Garcia. I always do the extra emphasis on Abrego.
They didn't do their homework.
They did not do their homework because he was clearly involved in human trafficking. And I said this immediately. It's really fun, Larry, because we create enough content where we can't. It's always nice to kind of wind up before you give your opinion, but sometimes you just got to give one. And I was looking into him pretty quick, just back of the napkin. I was thinking, okay, so he's got the 8 guys in his car and they're driving across the country and they all listed his house as their home address and they have no luggage. I mean, that's human smuggling, right? I mean, there's nothing else that could be. And then they wrote it for another 3 weeks, just like, no, he's a great guy. He's a Maryland dad. That's all he is. And then, oh man, he is a human smuggler. Dang.
And a wife beater.
And a wife beater.
And a member of MS-13.
How did they do that? Like that was I normally give the left credit for being smart. I guess I should stop doing that. I mean,
well, it's the Trump derangement syndrome that affects their ability to reason and see things straight. And so, if Trump says yes, they say no. If Trump says up, they say down. If Trump says black, they say white. And that's how a lot of people are responding to this man, the greatest political figure I've ever seen, bar none, and that includes Bill Clinton, it includes Barack Obama, that includes Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
I've never seen the like of it. For this guy to be to endure the lawfare, to endure the attempt to invoke a 25th Amendment, to endure all these lawsuits, 2 impeachments, 2 assassination attempts, and this guy loses the election. And normally when you lose an election, whether you're Jimmy Carter or George Herbert Walker Bush, your party won't even, your dog won't sniff you when you come home. You can't get a table at Fatburger. This guy loses the election in 2020, retains hold over the power of the party for 4 more years, and then comes back bigger than ever before. I've never seen anything like it. As you know, I ran briefly for president, and I wasn't doing it to displace Trump. I did it because I wanted to talk about some issues I thought our side was not talking about, including, and most importantly, the epidemic of fatherlessness, but also to talk about what I think has to happen, Alex, in order for us to really get government down to the size the Founding Fathers intended. And that is for an amendment to the Constitution to fix spending to a certain percentage of the GDP. Because what's really driving the debt and the deficit are the so-called entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and and Social Security, and they are untouchable. If you run promising to reform them, no matter how sensible your plan is, the other side will accuse you of hating the poor, the sick, the elderly. So the only way to get government down to the size it needs to get down to is to reform them. The only way to reform them is to do it in a way so voters can go to the politicians can go to the voters and say, I had to do that, otherwise I'd be breaking the law. So if we had an amendment that says the government can be no more than 10, 15% of GDP, and then a politician says, I'm sorry, don't blame me, blame the amendment that you guys passed, I had to do this, then and only then will government get down to the intended size. So that's another reason that I ran. And I hope that by the end of Donald Trump's term, he'll begin talking about this. So our echo chamber begins talking about this. So you'll begin talking about this. Joe Rogan begins talking about this. And then we can get a critical mass of the American people to recognize that the only way to get government down to the size it needs to get down to is with the amendment. And this is really important. The smaller the government, the more prosperous the American people, because the more money you leave in the pockets of the American people, the more productively the money can be spent. We high five when we have a 3% growth GDP, which Obama never did, by the way, in any full year. And the big, beautiful bill anticipates 3% GDP. We should be growing at 4%, 5%. 6%, because government is so much bigger than the founding fathers intended. In 1900, at all three levels, federal, state, and local, government took 9% in taxes from the American people. Now it takes 32%. And if you put a cost on mandates, government takes almost half in taxes of what the American people produce. It is outrageous. And people have no idea how much faster we would grow, how much more prosperous we would be if government got down to the size it should get down to. That's a conversation. That's an education. And Donald Trump could start this conversation at the end of his term and get enough energy going so we can ultimately do that. That's one of the reasons I ran. But the reason I'm telling you this story is this. We're talking about Donald Trump being this epic political figure. As you know, the governor of Florida, DeSantis, ran as well. And I'm on the campaign trail with all these people in Iowa, and I see him, and all of a sudden, a bunch of articles about how he's not good with people, he's not good with small talk. He was fine. And I went up to him, and I said, I hope this stuff isn't bothering you. I said, because what you're up against is what all of us are up against, and that is this guy over here named Donald Trump. He is sucking all the air out of the room. He is Elvis on steroids. I said, so don't feel bad that you're not gaining on him, because nobody is, nobody will. This guy's going to be the nominee. And so don't lose any sleep over this. Your time will come. And his whole body language changed a little bit. And I think he relaxed.
Yeah.
Because it's true. I've never seen the like of him.
Very interesting, Larry. You got such great wisdom for all of us, and I'm so grateful for it. I do want to. I feel like I'm taking advantage of you, and I don't want to keep you too much longer because you got to do at least 6 or 8 more hours of broadcast today after this show. But I got to ask about the documentary that's out now, Electric Vehicles, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I had a couple thoughts when I was going through it. It's always terrific work. Anything you do is terrific. But how come there's no self-driving combustion engine cars? Because I do feel like the self-driving car thing is going to happen. And
they do exist.
How come we don't combustion engine?
They do exist. There are some, but there aren't very many of them. It's just much easier technology to program an electric vehicle to make it drive than it is to do it with a gas-powered car. But there are some gas-powered cars that are self-driving. I discovered that when I was doing the documentary. The documentary is particularly relevant because Donald Trump has just now, in the big, beautiful bill, has taken out the tax credits for EVs. So one of the reasons that they were selling as well as they were is because of the fact that you get so much money back if you buy an EV. That's gone now. And so one wonders how robust the market for EVs is going to be. And also, Donald Trump signed an executive order preventing Gavin Newsom from banning the sale of gas-powered cars by 2035, which is what he wanted to do. By the way, when he issued that mandate, Gavin Newsom, several months ago, no more sale of gas-powered cars by the year 2035. 2 days later, he issued an energy alert telling the people who do own EVs in California, just 2.9% of all the vehicle owners in California have EVs. Don't charge them during peak hours because it taxes the California energy grid. So you want everybody to buy EVs, but the 2.9% of people who have them are already taxing the California energy grid. Beam me up, Scotty.
Yeah, so salemnow.com for the documentary, and you touch on stuff that I just love in that there's a humanitarian cost for this stuff, and we act like it's just virtuous to buy. We've somehow got acculturated to thinking electric cars good, combustion engine bad, but there is huge humanitarian costs for the electric vehicle industry. Can you speak to this? You've heard me talk about efforts from the legacy media to stop you from accessing shows like mine. They do it by limiting spectrum that's available to consumers like you to access shows like this. They actually claim it's a national defense issue, which is a bit of a stretch if you think about it. And Trump isn't buying it either, and neither is Senator Ted Cruz. In the big, beautiful bill, Republicans have heard your voice and are providing more spectrum. So what does that mean for you? It can reduce your monthly broadband bill and preserve your ability to watch, listen, and stream the content that you choose. Not what's chosen for you by some cable provider. The sale of this spectrum will also generate billions of dollars to reduce our national debt. Don't let the giant cable providers and legacy media continue to filter your information. Tell your senator and member of Congress to work with Senator Ted Cruz and President Donald J. Trump to expand spectrum and end the legacy media monopoly for good. You can learn more at endthecableopoly.org. That's endthecableopoly.org.
There really is. I mean, the same kind of women who would never buy a fur coat because of the way the minks are killed for a fur coat have no problem buying an EV. The stuff that goes into the batteries are called minerals or rare earth minerals, one of which is called cobalt. Cobalt primarily is mined out of the Republic of the Congo. Kids are employed, slave labor, making $1 or $2 a day, using their bare hands to mine this stuff, which is toxic. It's going to cause cancer over the long haul, but it's a necessary element that goes into the battery, along with lithium and nickel. And if people knew that Black kids aged 8, 10, 12 years old, Alex, were being forced to do this stuff with their own hands so that we can power our cars down the 105 freeway, I think a lot of people would change their minds. And there's a book called Cobalt Red about all of this. And if you read it, it's scary what's going on. It also makes us, of course, more dependent upon China for the computer chips to go into the cars. And China either controls or manufactures or produces almost all the rare earth minerals that go into the cars, either in China or in places they can control, like the Republic of the Congo. And the idea that a carbon footprint of an EV is smaller than the carbon footprint of a gas-powered car is also probably wrong, because it takes fossil fuel-generated energy to manufacture an EV, to transport an EV, and to charge an EV. So you look at the overall
Great
footprint.
Point.
It's probably not any smaller than the footprint of a gas-powered car. And they're more expensive. If you're mandating that you have to buy one, that means poor people are going to pay more for a car than they otherwise would pay for. And the batteries have short shelf life. They have all this toxic stuff in it. They have to be disposed of. You put them in the ground, they leak, and they threaten the quality of the underground water storage. So there are all sorts of issues regarding EVs that a lot of people have not thought through. I didn't know that much about EVs when I was approached to do the documentary. I had never driven one. I just assumed that they were probably better for the planet than gas-powered cars. And so the whole journey was me just learning and talking to about 50 different experts, including physicists and engineers and people that are in the car business, to learn all there is to know about what goes into an EV. So I leave it up to the viewer to make your own mind. That's why it's called EVs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they're really good. Primarily the self-driving stuff, Alex. Think about it. 40,000 Americans lose their lives on the road every single year. Almost all of it is because of driver error. That would be reduced to about 90 or 95%. That's how many lives would be saved if everybody had self-driving cars, because machines drive more efficiently. They don't sleep. They don't drink. They make better judgment. There's no road rage. And so while it's not foolproof, there'd be far fewer accidents and far fewer fatalities if we all went to self-driving. So that really is very, very impressive.
I love love the title. I mean, you frame it up so well because I love how you start from a premise of not knee-jerk negativity that just makes you much more credible in this. And I'm totally with you on the danger. I'm rooting for self-driving cars. I'll tell you, I like driving. I've got that much of a control freak vibe where I want to be the one behind the wheel if I'm driving. But also the dangerous thing I do now in my life is drive a car. It just is. It's just I don't get great sleep and I'm constantly working. I've got kids who wake me up in the middle of the night. I'm basically have work an East Coast job from the West Coast. And I do a lot of drives from LA down and back and stop and go traffic from north of LA. Those drives are horrible. They're really hard to do. And it is the most dangerous thing I do. And when there's a day where I feel like I can retire from that and let a robot do it, I'm going to do that. But we're not there yet. I think we're going to get there in my lifetime, maybe a lot sooner. And I would love for it to not rely on Chinese minerals and slave labor to get there. I would like for that to be the case.
Mm-hmm. I drive to and from work. I could do the show from the studio where I'm doing it right now if I wanted to, but I like being out and interacting with people.
Yeah, it's better. It's definitely better. When I was on SiriusXM, I would try to go in, even though they didn't make me go in for the same reason. It was just better to be there for the day.
But I would say at least once a week, I have a close call / near miss where had I not done this, had I not done that, had I not seen this person, I could have had an accident. Yep. It is really the most dangerous thing that we do. And we have more fatalities per miles driven than the Europeans do. I'm not quite sure why, but we do.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's so great. And I'm glad you did this. So it's on salemnow.com. So it stays within the family.
One of the reasons, Alex, why our life expectancy is shorter, is as short as it is compared to the Europeans. They think it's because of gun homicides and things like that. But it's one of the reasons because of our fatalities on the road are far higher per capita than theirs are.
Yeah, really interesting. And also it's anti-family. And then there's always this element, if you distill almost any of the left policies. So I've got 4 kids now, Larry, and they're young. So I have gear. I usually bring a double stroller and a hiking backpack whenever I'm out with all of them. And there's no EV that can haul that. I can't get a Tesla, even the $100,000 one that fits all that stuff. The only other thing I can do is drive a minivan. And I'm a warm-blooded straight male American. I'm not driving a minivan, Larry. Sorry, judge me for it. I'm not doing it.
Not going to do it. And then we're talking about heavy hauling. The EVs are just not suitable for that. So if you are somebody that's in the business where you have to haul really heavy stuff, you can't do it with an EV.
Yeah, exactly. So I have the biggest car on the road. It gets 12.9 miles to the gallon. And so that's what I got to deal with. And so come up with something for me. Fix something. But it's not this. It's not this. This isn't what we're at now. That's not where it is. Anyway, Larry, just so fantastic. Last one, because I have to get your take on it. Israel's strategic strike on Iran. This will be a little bit dated when the show comes out, probably, but just your initial take. I mean, it looks super surgical. I know that we're not looking to get in every war around the world, but I mean, first day looks pretty good. I mean, but what are you thinking?
Well, once again, we're relying on Israel to take out the garbage. Remember the time when they took out the Iraqi nuclear facility some years ago? If you have an avowed enemy that promises your destruction and your enemy is marching steadily toward acquiring a nuclear weapon, you have a few options. You can cross your fingers and hope nothing ever happens, or you can take action. And that's what Israel did. It was just a question of time. And frankly, I'm surprised they waited as long as they did. I cheer what Israel has done. I pray that it's successful. I know that Iran is going to retaliate in some sort of way, but I believe the regime is far weaker now than it's been in a long time. I talked to a lot of Iranian expats here in LA. There are a lot of them. And unlike Hamas in Gaza, Hamas is popular even after what happened on October the 7th and the decimation of Gaza. Polls still show that the majority of Palestinians support Hamas. That is not true of the Ayatollah and the Iranians. Most Iranians despise the Ayatollah, and I believe that this surgical strike, taking out leaders of the Republican Guard and others, which apparently Israel has done, could very well lead to the whole destabilization of that entire regime, in which case the world can breathe a sigh of relief because, as you know, Iran is the #1 exporter of terror. They're the ones who backed Hamas on October the 7th. They're the ones who backed the Houthis, and they're the ones backing Hezbollah.
That's right.
So getting rid of Iran and the Islamic Republic of Iran would be a huge gift to the world.
Just absolutely fantastic. Larry Elder, you are one of the best to ever broadcast, and you do so many other things too. The books are all great. The 10 Things You Can't Say in America, his first book, was deeply influential on me, as was Showdown, your second book. As Goes California is your latest book.
We have Father's Day coming up soon. The book I wrote about my dad, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. I would strongly recommend, if you're looking for a gift for the old man, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. It's about my 8-hour conversation with my father, who I despised until I was 25 years old, and then realized what a huge man he was.
Amazing. Well, that's so great. I'm so glad to get that out there too. LarryElder.com, 3 to 6 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday for the radio show, podcast, Salem News Channel. Just go LarryElder.com for everything. Larry, I've got to discipline myself to get these interviews shorter so we can do these regularly, because I know you. I know you're cool now, but in hour 7 of your broadcast journey today, you're gonna be like, why did Marlow keep me so long? He's so insensitive.
Why am I running out of energy?
Yeah.
Where's all my gas? So I gave it all to Marlow.
Yeah, and the other thing is I let people finish their sentences, which is another thing that is just the guests love it until they're exhausted by the end. All right, thanks to Misty, thanks to all of you in the audience, thanks to Larry, of course, and we'll talk to you next time.